Here with me now is Chad Wolf, former acting DHS secretary, now with the American First Policy Institute. Chad, I may have to break in if Elon breaks in with his press conference, however it takes form. But let me ask you about this. Are we ever going to get to the bottom of what DHS was up to with this misinformation board, headed, by the way, by a woman who was providing a lot of misinformation about things like Russian collusion herself?
Well, I certainly hope so. Certainly with a Republican House and Jim Jordan chairing that committee, I think we're going to start to get some answers. Obviously, we haven't had that oversight in a couple of years. We haven't had the ability to ask some of these difficult questions about what did DHS do and what time frame, because I think some of the things that Secretary Mayorkas has testified about is up in question. Exactly when was this disinformation board actually operating, and what was their mission? What was their charter, and what were they designed to do? It's one thing to go after foreign adversaries and foreign misinformation trying to affect U.S. lives. It's another thing entirely to start looking at domestic issues and domestic free speech. So I think there's a couple of, there's certainly some issues that they need to answer for.
Chad, as former acting head of DHS, you know how it operates, what its operations are, what they consist of. Why do you think a misinformation board would be established in DHS? What was the rationale for that?
Well, it's such a great question. There's a lot of different operating components within the department that looks at foreign adversaries, looks at information that they're peddling to make sure that we are protecting U.S. citizens. But they do that at an operational level every single day and have done that for years and years and years. But to create a disinformation board and to house it in the Secretary's office makes this issue political in nature. And so that was one of the most concerning things that certainly I looked at and I saw. But I think there's a number of issues. Like I said, once you start going into the domestic free speech and First Amendment issues here in the U.S., and you're not looking at just foreign adversary speech, I think you start to get into a very slippery slope. And I think that's what a lot of folks were very, very concerned about. If you're looking at the origins of COVID, why did we withdraw from the U.S., from Afghanistan, things of that nature, anything to do with border security. These are issues that the American people need to decide about. You need to be presented all sides, and you shouldn't have a government entity starting to look at and trying to decide, well, what is truth and what is not.
Well, simple question did they want to, or are they in the process of trying to turn DHS into a political tool?
Well, I think they have done that in this administration. I mean, whether it's that disinformation board, certainly what we see at the border, there's no other reason that you would take one of the most secure borders that we have seen in our lifetime and turn it upside down and make it one of the most insecure borders if you didn't have some type of political agenda at work here. What it is, I think that is also up in the air and is really primed for some oversight hearings over the next 5 or 6 months, and I think we're going to hopefully see that out of a Republican House.
But Chad, how do we fix this? I mean, these are two. We have first of all DHS, which is a huge organization created after 9/11. Bottom line is there seemed to be a purpose for it after 9/11 when we were worried about terrorism. Yeah. But it's so easy to turn an institution like that into a political tool. You also have a very similar problem at the FBI. So, I mean, do we have a serious problem with law enforcement becoming too politicized, don't we?
Well, I do think that there can be some better guardrails and some better oversight. And when you look at the Department of Homeland Security, a lot of this work, the disinformation work, doesn't solely reside in our cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency. We call that CISA, but a lot of it does. And since it was created in 2018, more and more authorities and more resources have been given to it. And I'm not sure that the proper oversight has been administered as well. So I think that's something for Congress to certainly take a look at.
And finally, something that hopefully we'll be able to take a look at some point over the next hour or so, if Elon Musk comes through with his press conference. We have this issue where the head of the CIA and the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, a former one, James Clapper and John Brennan, were coming out with just flat out lies, saying that the New York Post story about Hunter's laptop was in fact Russian disinformation. Everybody seemed to buy in that in the legacy media, and Jordan wants to investigate that as well. Does that need to be investigated? Do we have to find out where they got their information that this was Russian disinformation when it wasn't?
Well, absolutely. I think all aspects of the story need to be looked at. When you have 50 or 51 former intelligence and national security officials making such claims, the issue is, they have a lot of credibility. And when they weigh into a political, in a political environment in which they did, based off of what information? Is it just pure speculation?
Yeah.
They need to be clear with the American public about that, because the American people believe that these folks, 50 to 51 individuals, have more information than they do. And in fact, the reality is they didn't. In fact, they made it up, and they didn't have any information to base their decision on, and they were very wrong in that as well. So I think there's a lot of different layers to peel back on this issue.
Very, very interesting stuff. Chad Wolf, thank you very much for being here, Chad. Appreciate it.